RotoHeat Dynasty Fantasy Football. Join the page. It's a great community of people who are always giving opinions, looking for answers to like trade questions or valuing players and things like that. So if you really like Dynasty Fantasy Football and want to get in a lot of people's opinions, I think that's a great group to get in on Facebook. And then don't forget to like and subscribe on the YouTube channel. You'll get notified anytime we go live. We've got live shows happening throughout the week multiple times. There was one just this morning, or I'm sorry, just today at noon. They had one yesterday. And once the season gets closer, we're gonna have more live streams throughout the week. So give us a like and subscribe. And I'm joined by Dan Chung, also known as DMo. DMo, how are we doing today?
Good, man. Just staying busy, getting excited for the draft. So just getting the countdown.
Yeah, we got 2 weeks from today, right? As the start. Yeah. The way I think the draft starts at like 7:30 or something like that. And unfortunately for me, I work at 4 a.m. So I have to get up at like 3:30, somewhere in there. So I usually just try and make it to the Patriots pick, and then I head to bed, and then I guess that gives me something to listen to on my way to work in the morning, the back half of the draft or something like that. So definitely excited to see where a lot of these guys' landing spots go, and I'm excited probably in the next, I think, couple weeks. I'm not sure what our schedule was, but we should probably morph it to talk about some of these rookies coming out these next 2 weeks. So that's always fun to talk about too, because I think you and I both have been doing quite a bit of research. Yeah. I think the only really news, and you can bring up something else if I'm missing it, but any news and notes items that I think are kind of significant is it's kind of not. I mean, I feel like it's not like being like blown out like maybe Deshaun Watson's was, obviously, like with a player having some off the field issues, but Joe Mixon's aggravated menacing charges, I think is what it was called, have resurfaced due to quote unquote new evidence. So I would like to really, because I have kind of an opinion on this, and it seems like Mixon owners wouldn't like it. But what's your opinion on this Joe Mixon these off the field issues that he's having?
It seems, I was a little worried about him, and then you heard about the recent shooting that was at like one of the houses that he owned. But guy seems to be kind of Teflon. A lot of this stuff just hadn't stuck to him recently, so it does shade his character and does, bring up a lot of off-field issues that he's had in the past. But I think it's just kind of paints a negative picture from him in the public eye. I think it may play well into what happens with the Bengals and what they want to do with the team. Right now, I don't think, they let Samaje Perine go, and they haven't figured out what they were talking about, what they're doing with Mixon. They're talking about possibly cutting him, possibly restructure. Who knows? I think a lot of it will come down to the draft and seeing if they're going to pick up someone there, and if they feel comfortable enough with the backfield that they'll have, and see what they can do with Mixon. But I think just the off the field issues gives them enough reason, I think, to be able to, he's been pretty productive and he's been pretty successful, and from what my understanding, pretty popular as well in Cincinnati, just with what he's done on the field. I think it gives the team a little PR relief in being able to kind of let him go just based off of these surroundings and maybe what the team really needs going forward.
Yeah, and I think that it's definitely possible he gets let go, even if like nothing sticks to him permanently. Like if the way his contract is too, he's paid pretty heavily this year. If he's not willing to restructure, the team could just like use this also as like a reason to cut him. But really, it's probably more the salary cap concerns moving forward than anything. I mean, I think Mixon's a pretty good running back, but I think there's a plethora of guys that could probably do the same thing as him. He's really volume based when it comes to his overall numbers. So the guy seems like he's had, issues just even before the pros with the video that surfaced of him hitting a woman in a restaurant or a bar or whatever, prior to him getting drafted. But, he carved out himself a nice career. And I could just see the Bengals moving on. And then if they cut him and move on from him, there is a possibility that like just at this point, like with him being a little bit older and maybe demanding too much money, he might struggle to find himself as a starting running back somewhere else. Even though I do think he's got like a year or two left in the tank. But it does make sense for the Bengals to move on from him, contract wise and PR wise, because not that long ago, I feel like the Bengals had a really bad reputation of having like a lot of players with bad character issues. Like they call it like the team with like the most players that have been to prison or something like that. You hear a lot more here in Ohio. But I think that's just something that they obviously want to get away from. And he's kind of somewhat bringing that back, and the league, and not really the league, but I feel like organizations are harder on guys now than they used to be when stuff like that comes out. Like it used to be, I feel like unless there was like video evidence, like what happened with Ray Rice, you were kind of safe. But it seems like now just if people say things and they happen, you're in trouble. But let's not. I wouldn't be surprised if a video got released or something. Multiple eyewitnesses say the same thing, like similar to like Deshaun Watson's case, obviously. That Mixon's career could be done and over with, but I still could see him playing somewhere. Just if it's not on the Bengals, I think his value plummets pretty significantly. So, was there any other news or notes this week? Oh, Odell. I knew I was missing something. Odell Beckham Jr. got signed by the Ravens. I'll take this one first. I would say this is an interesting landing spot because obviously he goes there and he's their best wide receiver. I would still say he's more talented than Rashad Bateman, even for his age and coming off an injury. I really think this is good for Lamar because he seemed to really like this signing. I mean, he posted a picture on Twitter or Instagram with his son or Odell posted a picture with his son in a Lamar Jackson jersey, and then Lamar Jackson posted like a screenshot of him and Odell FaceTiming. So it almost like leads to believe that even if Lamar doesn't get traded for by another organization, he's gonna step on the field this year. I think that puts a lot of Ravens fans at ease. Maybe get another year to figure out how to get Lamar secured long term. As for Odell's fantasy value, I mean I don't really value him that high just because of him coming off an injury and his age. But I think this is a pretty good landing spot with the potential volume that I think he could see. I think he and Lamar have had a friendship or like a bond off the field for some years now. So hopefully that can translate to the field. So I do like it for his fantasy value with him going to a team where he could pump out some decent volume. What are your thoughts on Odell to the Ravens?
Yeah, I like it first, I guess, from the aspect of Lamar going to the Ravens. I do like that aspect too. I think there was talk about Lamar actively trying to recruit and kind of convince Odell to sign with the Ravens. So that kind of makes you want to believe that Lamar is going to eventually either plays on the franchise tag or get some deal done with the Ravens. So it's good news for Lamar. Also for Odell, I think it, like you said, it is a pretty good landing spot. I think he was choosing between them and the Jets. And the Jets look like they'll be pretty high powered with Aaron Rodgers once he eventually signs. But there was a wider opening with the Ravens. Recently, I produced a short about one player that I'm not drafting at all, and that's Rashad Bateman. I just don't trust his productivity, his ability to stay on the field, and just like everything I've seen about him on Twitter too. Generally, just didn't feel like his character was something that I could really trust myself with going long-term dynasty. So I do think it is good for Odell. He's gonna be stepping into, maybe that 1A role. Maybe he'll definitely be second fiddle to Mark Andrews, which is helpful because I don't think Odell at his current age and his injury history can kind of prosper in that number one alpha role. But I think he could play a really solid number two role. We kind of saw that when he did that with the Rams. So I do like it for him. I wouldn't mind picking him up as like a wide receiver 3 or like a flex on my team. Maybe not hoping for too much, but hey, he's got some skills still, and if they get down to the red zone, he can have a game where he puts up like 2 touchdowns. So I do like it for him. They signed him, I think, for like 18 million, which is a pretty good amount for 1 year. So it kind of bodes that hey, he's gonna be used a little bit more than some of these other guys. So I like it for him. Long term, just with 2 injuries, having laid off the game for a little bit, just hard to really see anything beyond maybe a year or two. And Ravens kind of did the same thing; they signed him to a year. So
yeah, I would agree. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Odell retire here soon, like in like after this season or next season. The dude's compiled a lot of money through sponsors and stuff because he was so entertaining early in his career, and he's constantly getting injured. There's no point keep continuing to put your body through that just to rehabilitate to potentially get injured again. I think he's pretty much 1 injury away from retirement and 2 seasons max. So, but yeah, should be a solid option for Lamar, the wide receiver position, which I feel like he's lacked pretty much, most of his career, even though I do think people don't give Hollywood Brown enough credit for how talented he actually is. But Odell is like a timing receiver where Lamar, I feel like, doesn't really have that timing and is not known for that timing and accuracy. So it maybe gives him a chance to prove that he can be a guy that can sit in the pocket and throw it more than people may seem or may think. So, and speaking of Lamar, he was our cover boy for today's stream. He which leads into our topic of top 10 dynasty quarterbacks. And like we did maybe several weeks back, we just kind of compiled our own lists and of each of our top 10, and then we just kind of go over it. If obviously we know what our lists are, and it was interesting for me to see that we pretty much had all but one guy in our top 10. I think you had one guy in there in your bottom 5 that was different than one of the guys in my bottom 5. I think our top 5s were pretty much the same, just everything's a little bit different
Crazy.
order.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think quarterbacks are probably one of the easier positions to rank when it comes to fantasy, because I mean, I don't know how you think of it, but I think we look at guys that have the longevity and are putting up still crazy numbers as like easy top 5, like maybe top 3, top 4 guys. And then you get to like the dual threat guys whose careers might not be as long, but they're just so good at fantasy that you can't have them out of your like top 7 just because they can give you 3 to 4 years of just being a competitor just based on them alone, playing almost 2 positions with running back and quarterback. And then I feel like you get to the back half of those guys that maybe it's like those older quarterbacks that have produced that now they're later in their careers, or it's maybe some of those dual threat quarterbacks that are getting to the end of their careers. So it's always interesting. I feel like we just cycle through until eventually, new studs come in and take in those top 5 spots, or dual threat quarterbacks, the way the league is now, take over and they're in like those top 7 spots. So I feel like a lot of dynasty quarterback rankings, we have a lot of similar guys in the top 10 consistently, whereas with running back and wide receiver and maybe even tight end, we're seeing a lot more discrepancies through the top 10 guys. So let's just get right into it. And I think, it'll go through my bottom 5 guys first. We'll start with Dak Prescott at the 10 spot. I mean, I really like Dak Prescott. I think he's one of those more safer guys that can put up a lot of yards on a consistent basis and a lot of touchdowns. Doesn't really have much much rushing upside at the quarterback position. He's pretty much just a pocket passer, and he can throw for 400 yards on any given day and really on any given defense. So hard to keep him out of the top 10, especially when he's got a top 5 dynasty wide receiver talent and CD Lamb there. Got a solid number 2 option with Brandon Cooks this upcoming season, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them still dabble at a rookie in the 2nd or 3rd round to potentially develop. And then obviously Michael Gallup at their number 3 spot, who's a good big bodied wide receiver. Lamar at number 9. I stuck Lamar at number 9 because he can obviously put up top 3 numbers, but now we're having 2 seasons in a row where we've seen him get injured. And I think right now, I personally think that he's extremely dependent on his ability to run the ball when it comes to being not only a starting quarterback in the league, but a good starting fantasy quarterback. So if he can't run the ball, I can't really put him in my top 10, but as long as he's, on the field and can run the ball, you can't keep a guy of that talent outside the top 10. I'll put Deshaun Watson at 8, and this is really mostly of what Deshaun Watson has done. He's kind of loosely put in there at the 8th spot because I really do think he is a franchise has the potential to go back to where he was as a franchise quarterback, potentially being a top 3 prospect. He's still young. He's got the dual threat ability, but he doesn't need to lean on it. He can sit in the pocket and pass it anywhere on the field. So I wouldn't be surprised if, he just ends up never putting it back together and I don't see him on the top 10 list again, or if next year we've got him in our top 3 to 4. Justin Fields at 7. This guy earned his spot up here at the 7th spot. He led the league in rushing last year at the quarterback position. And if he didn't get hurt or they didn't hold him out, I really think that he would have broke Lamar Jackson's single season rushing record. I think he right now is the best running quarterback in football. So with that being said, I can't put him outside of my top 7. Justin Herbert at number 6. Justin Herbert for me is kind of like a younger version of Dak, where he doesn't run the ball, but he can throw it anywhere on the field. He can throw it for 400 yards on any given defense with, it seems like, any weapons, honestly, as well. My only knock on Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, really, which I didn't talk about, is they can be inconsistent at times, where with some of these guys that have these rushing floors, you've got a safer floor. But with Justin Herbert and Dak Prescott, I feel like there's some weeks they just really, really disappoint you where you don't see that as much with quarterbacks that run the ball. So on these bottom 5 guys, I know there's not going to be a ton of guys that you disagree with because again we have a lot of these guys similarly ranked. But what would you change? I guess which guy's not on your list and why?
Sure. I guess the guy that didn't make my list was number 10 that you have there, Dak Prescott. He was honestly pretty close, but he just hasn't given me. He isn't quite. I think you described it well in describing the type of quarterbacks we want for Dynasty. I think there's a couple different philosophies, but I do kind of like the idea of have one range of them where you have really long term QBs that are there for like 6, 7, 8 years. We're talking like the Mahomes kind of folks. I really like those. And then there's a set of quarterbacks, like you said, the running with the rushing upside, and they have really, shorter career in terms of fantasy production, but they do really well. I kind of found Dak Prescott to not be, he doesn't really run like you mentioned at all, but I didn't quite think he was up to the skill of the other pocket passers that really separate him from the lead of the lead. So I kind of had him a little lower down below the spot that you have him at 10. The one thing I was kind of curious about was, all these quarterbacks have been fairly established for a couple of years. Justin Fields kind of the new one or whatever. I didn't know what you thought about the rookie quarterbacks. Did any of them come close to your top 10? Are there any reasons you kept them out? Just wanted your general thoughts on rookie quarterbacks and how you rank them or how they fall in terms of your top 10.
If we had a top 12, I'd probably slide one of the rookie quarterbacks, CJ Stroud, in there because I do think he's the complete package when it comes to talent in the NFL. I think he's got the size. I think he also has a little bit of dual threat ability, and we saw it in the Georgia game this past season. I just don't think it was utilized enough by Coach Ryan Day during the regular part of the season. So I'm not going to be surprised if we see CJ Stroud slide in to the NFL and get, maybe, it might not be much, like maybe 30, 40 rushing yards, but I could see them like building plays like how the Bengals build for Joe Burrow, where they run an occasional draw. And I think he's also very, very talented at throwing on the run. So if he rolls out and there's not many guys open, he could look to run the ball more this year. So he was a guy I really debated on putting above Dak Prescott, but it's really hard for me to put a rookie quarterback over guys that are proven and putting up really, really good fantasy numbers. So it's probably going to be pretty rare to find a quarterback to throw in the top 10 for me any given season. Honestly, next season is probably a good chance for, if Caleb Williams plays the way he did, I might slide him in my top 10. And Trevor Lawrence would have probably been in the top 10 a couple of years, or the couple of years ago when he was drafted. But I do like some of these quarterbacks, and honestly, I do like Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson as well as prospects. And if we did top 15, I probably would have both of them and that. So they're not far out of my top 10 list.
Gotcha. Cool. And then I guess just one more question is, of these 5, do you think any of them could end up being, flash forward 1 year at this point, do you think any of them could be number 1, maybe number 2, or who do you think would be the highest, who has the highest upside? Who do you think could be kind of one of your top 5 or one of your high top ranked rookie quarterbacks or quarterbacks?
I don't know if anybody's going to. Yeah. I don't know if any of these guys are going to pass Mahomes or my top 2 guys right now. Obviously, Mahomes is everyone's number 1. I'll say my number 2 as a surprise. But personally, for me, my top 2 are probably solidified for at least this year and next year. Mm-hmm. It wouldn't surprise me, though, if Fields or Watson potentially were guys that I put at the number 3 spot next year. Justin Fields is kind of in a prove-it year when it comes to his throwing ability. I feel like he's got enough talent now at the wide receiver position. They just have to address O-line. So as long as he gets enough time back there, he could potentially be a guy that I put at number 3 spot. Again, with his skill set, he's probably not a guy that's holding that spot consistently. And then, Deshaun Watson, like I said, I think he's a guy that if he gets back to where he was when he was on the Texans, he could be a top 3 guy as well. So those 2 right there. I don't see Herbert, Lamar, or Dak getting into my top 3 or 4 guys at this point.
Gotcha.
Cool. I think I've seen enough of them. Yep. All right, let's slide into your bottom 5.
Sure. At number 10, I have Deshaun Watson. I think a lot of what you mentioned rings true for me too. I really liked what he did with the Texans. He had quite a bit of a layoff, and he came to a slow start at the end of last year. But I think they're building a pretty good team around him. They got some good weapons. They got him some running the short underneath routes with Elijah Moore, We saw, Amari Cooper is always pretty good game, and you've seen DPJ now in 3 years, and he's improved every year. So I like the offense that they've put around Deshaun Watson. I think last year was just a glimpse of just him knocking off a lot of the rust. I think he can get back to those levels. And like you, I mean, I think he's one of my bottom five. He's one that can reach maybe like the top three. I need to see him put together one solid year and be like, oh yeah, that's what I remember. That's what the Texan year looked like. And if you can show me like the weapons around him are playing well too, I think he can definitely rise up in the ranks there. So I do like Deshaun Watson. Number 9, I have Lamar Jackson. My biggest concern with, I rank him a lot lower than a lot of folks. I think you and me both rank him a lot lower than other folks. I think it's
Oh,
not only just because of kind of what's going on recently, but also the philosophy in terms of how we want to build around our dynasties. We both talked about in the sense that dynasty you can either kind of go for that really elite quarterback pocket passer that's going to be good for 8, 9, 10 years, however long, or you might go for one of the quarterbacks that have rushing upside and they'll give you a little smaller window but they can produce a little higher. I think with you, I'm kind of the same way. I'd rather have a quarterback kind of long term, can give you still a lot of those numbers. Maybe they might not have those 40, 50 point weeks, like 7 or 8 times a season, but they'll put up really consistent high 25, a couple 30 spikes here and there. And that's kind of what I prefer overall in terms of the quarterbacks I prefer in my leagues. A lot of it is also just because of when you're thinking about your team and how you're rotating and thinking of your dynasty windows. For me, I already have my running backs kind of in a really small window, 2 to 3 year window. I have my wide receivers looking at them like 4 to 5 year type things. Tight ends, it depends on how it develops. I really don't want to have another quarterback like Lamar Jackson or possibly Justin Fields where they're really good for a few years and I spent the assets to acquire them. Maybe I drafted them. They give me a good chance and good run at the title for 3 or 4 years if all the other pieces fall in place. But then once that drop off comes, I'm out there looking for another quarterback again. I'd rather just have some sort of certainty for a little longer period. Don't have to re-expend my assets again to try to get another quarterback. I'd rather just have someone locked in, and you kind of see that I think with the NFL as well. I kind of see Panthers were kind of a good example. They had Newton for like a good while, but he ended his career early too because of injuries. And man, those years were glorious. But a few years, 2 3 years after, they've been cycling, rotating through their quarterbacks, trying to find a guy. So I don't want to be in that kind of situation either with my dynasty teams. I like to have someone locked in. That's kind of why I have Lamar a little lower there. And past 2 seasons, he's played 12 games in each season. It's just a little bit too much concern for me. He does have that sky high, upside. It could be really high, but I think that time's past him and it's just not there for him. And number 8, the quarterback that I have from the rookie class that I really liked was CJ Stroud. He just put together a really good tape in college. I think you talked a lot about, the fact that he was very accurate passer and threw a lot. But towards the end in the Georgia game, also we saw him being able to run a little bit and show a little bit of his wheels too. So I think that bodes well for college or for the pro game when you're coming in and you're able to run a little bit. You can kind of pad your stats, but also a little more time to run, get more fantasy points. Just being a little more a higher floor. CJ Stroud's really going to be doing that. We saw that he has the ability, but I do like the fact that he's young, he's mobile, so he can do that. So I kind of have him there. Again, he's really young. I see him right now as one of the young, really good, accurate pocket passers. So I kind of rank him that way, and that's why I'm able to fit him into my top 10. If it's someone more athletic like Anthony Richardson, I kind of view them. Again, he has like that super high upside. I'd rather just kind of kick him outside my top 10 for now. Just too much risk for me to take on
right.
at the quarterback position. Number 7, I have same with you. Very similar. It's amazing. Justin Fields, I think he's a good quarterback. He did a lot of passing in college. So anyone that's really knocking him too much for his passing in the NFL, I think you got to give it a year. Now that hopefully they'll improve the O line like you talked about. He has DJ Moore there. The question is, is he going to get the volume, or is he going to be able to balance it with his running, or are they going to be deferring more of the running now? They want him to pass a little more, and that he got weapons. I think there's still a few questions around him, and also the fact that we've only seen him do it from Game 6 last year when they started designing runs and he did get a little bit of his shoulder dinged up. So we'll see. Really, again, how much is he going to run next year? How much of it is designed? How does he adapt to his weapons? He has the talent, and we saw good glimpses of it last year. So I'm really hopeful for this year, and we'll see what happens. Number 6, I have Justin Herbert. I think he's one of the I think he's passed for the most yards in the first 3 seasons of their career or something. So he has quite an arm, and he's done it with some random weapons that have been in and out. Mike Williams been in and out of games. Keenan Allen's been missing games here and there, but he's been able to throw and get it done. And I actually like it a lot more going forward now that he has offensive coordinator Kellen Moore. he was the coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys when they were putting up 30, 40 points and getting sending all sorts of business to everybody. So some of that I think will overflow to Justin Herbert, and I'm hoping that they're going to add another piece, maybe a good tight end to their team, maybe Dalton Kincaid or someone like that, and they could really utilize Justin Herbert for what he does. He's a great pocket passer, has some wheels, and we've seen him run a little bit, but I think it's all made in his arm. So future looks good for him. So I like him locked in there at number 6.
Yeah, obviously, I don't have many. I don't have many things I disagree with here. Outside of, I guess, CJ Stroud, and it's not like I really disagree that big with it, because I probably put him at number 11. For me, with Herbert, talking about the Chargers getting Herbert a weapon, I really think that they're in the market for wide receiver and potentially tight end in this upcoming draft. Wouldn't it be it'd be a dream landing spot to really see Jackson Smith and Jigba, land there, because he would just get spoon fed, I would imagine. But do you think maybe some later wide receivers, like maybe like a Zay Flowers or I won't say Jordan Addison, because I feel like he's a little bit higher ranked, but maybe like a Quentin Johnston, like if one of those guys landed with the Chargers, do you think that would significantly increase their draft capital?
I think it would help. Yeah. Even though they do have some weapons, Keenan Allen's aging, I think there are words that they want to keep him around forever. I think he's going to be a, permanent Charger guy, but, we've seen age catching up to him, and he's been missing a few games. And then, Mike Williams has just been in and out of the game, always injured, very super inconsistent. They haven't really had a good tight end position there. And I've seen Austin Eckler doing a lot of pass catching, not only because he's really talented, but I also think it's because of the lack of any options. If they do add one of the wide receivers, someone like Josh Downs or someone that works out of the slot would be pretty nice. I think Keenan Allen works out of the slot too, but I think his game is a little more versatile. Might be a chance to push him outside a little bit and get someone underneath for him. So one of those, maybe like a day 2 rookie that we're seeing in there would be decent. I wouldn't mind them trying to pick someone up bigger like a Quentin Johnson and move on from Mike Williams, but we'll have to see what direction they really want to go. But
yeah, it's kind of one of those teams where I think whoever they draft, if it's not like one of the top guys, it significantly increases their draft capital. So I was curious. And then the only other thing was for Justin Fields, I personally think that we just saw his best rushing season, which is fine. Like over 1,000 yards for a quarterback's a lot. Do you see him more of being like a 700 to 800 rushing yards per year? And then I'm not sure exactly what passing stats to compile on that, but they're obviously going to continue running some designed runs with him. I think they're just not going to showcase him as much as they did last year. With that being said, if he was a 700 to 800 rushing yards per year guy, do you think that maybe increases the value for him a little bit, that he can actually sit back in the pocket some more? Or do you want to continue to see him kind of just run the ball as much as he did last year?
Yeah, I think last year he ran I think it was over 1,000, but I think that was a lot. And I think it's more reasonable to say somewhere in the 600, 700 range. I think we're looking at 300s is Trevor Lawrence. I think Burrow did maybe 300, 200 in his early years. But, a little more of 500, 600, 700 range would be kind of nice. I think that does pad his stats a little bit, and, he doesn't have to throw for as many touchdowns. Do I think they're going to run about 5? Does he run for 500, 600 yards? I think so. I think they're definitely going to tone it down less. I think, you really don't want your franchise quarterback running around all the time, racking up all those yards. That wear and tear will get to you. Look at Lamar Jackson, right? You can't say that,
right.
He's a couple of years he's been running like crazy, and it's kind of catching up a little bit. So, less rushing attempts would be helpful for Justin Fields, and I think he does have a little better of an arm than Lamar, so they can lean on that more, especially if they want to really develop into a franchise quarterback. I think of Jalen Hurts, right? He was kind of seen as a rushing quarterback, but I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if he ran all that much last year. I think they really tried to develop him as a passer, and I'm kind of curious if they want to do something similar with Fields to really display more of the passing to extend the longevity of his career. So.
Yeah, I was just about to bring up what was Jalen Hurts' rushing yards in 2022, and it was 760. So I can see the Bears utilizing Justin Fields in a very, very similar way that the Eagles utilized Jalen Hurts. It seemed like he ran more when it was a bigger game on the line, because he is a better runner than he is a passer, and he's a good passer still. but he is better at that. I mean, the Super Bowl, he ran the ball 15 times. So I see a similar usage, and I think it's a perfect usage for the skill set of those players. So I'm hoping that they take a play, they learn from how the Eagles utilize their dual threat quarterback as well. And then we did have a little, kind of not really a question in the chat, but it's kind of an interesting name, Daniel Jones. What would you put? He's easily out of my top 10 personally.
Yeah.
But he is a true dual threat quarterback, and he had a best season last year with Brian Dabble. Where would he be at on maybe your list if you had to compile out further out?
Man, I'd probably put him just, kind of think off the top of my head, probably around like the 16, 17 range, just kind of behind some of those rookie quarterbacks and maybe mixed in with some of the older veteran quarterbacks as well. I just, haven't seen it really much through his passing game. He has a little better floor with the running now that he's added, and it's and he's behind in a good offense run by Dable, but just haven't really seen him throw it. It may be due to his weapons, but the fact that he hasn't had any good wide receivers, I don't think he's had a wide receiver top 500 yards last year either. So it just kind of makes me worried. Like if even if you are good, I think you find a way to elevate the talent around you, get better wide receivers. I mean, it's not fair to compare, but like Patrick Mahomes, he didn't have all world talents around him last year, all the way around, but he was able to get it done. I'd say the wide receivers at Giants are probably even a step down from the Chiefs, and of course, Mahomes is way better than Jones, but there's just too much lacking there that there's not enough for me to feel like I can support Danny Dimes to be much higher, than 15th at all. I don't see the ceiling unless he's getting like a couple really good receivers in there or something like that. So without that, or if he's running a lot suddenly, then you suddenly have a really high floor, possible good ceiling. Without those, just don't see him really being able to break out of the fold or really spike during any of these weeks.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. Where like if we were to throw like our number 10 guy in that Giants offense, I think they would have made the wide receivers better than that Daniel Jones made them. I don't really think Daniel Jones is elevating a lot of guys around him to where he's just like, again, he's a guy that plays well in his skill set, and and I think he needs to be a guy that runs the ball quite a bit, and the Giants have the luxury of also having a good running back in Saquon Barkley to where teams aren't always don't know who's going to be running the ball in the backfield, so it helps him a lot. But I would like to see him get a number one receiver so he could maybe get at least the chance to prove himself that he can be pretty good. But I don't think he's like of the top tier guys that are elevating the talent around them. I agree. Mm-hmm. All right, my top 5 guys. Number 5, Jalen Hurts. Again, I mean, it was kind of hard for me to rank him this low personally, but all the guys above him, I think have longer careers is really the only reason I have him lower than them. He's a top, in redraft, I probably put him in my top 2, top 3. But in dynasty formats, I look a little bit further out for quarterbacks. I'm looking at 5, 6, 7 years. I just don't know where Jalen Hurts is going to be there, where maybe these other guys I have a little bit more confidence in are playing at still a high level that late in their career. Trevor Lawrence at the 4 spot. I could see this guy making the jump above Josh Allen next season. Huge jump in year 2 with adequate talent around him. Now we add Calvin Ridley to the offense. We really could see Trevor Lawrence potentially fight for most passing yards this upcoming season. It wouldn't surprise me if he's up there. I think the dude's super talented, true franchise quarterback. Going to be top 5 for probably a while. Josh Allen at number 3. Again, he was a little bit harder for me to rank in this group of the top 5 personally, because he does have this he has a lot of decent amount of inconsistent games. But with that being said, I still think that he's not dependent on his ability to run the ball like a guy like Jalen Hurts is. But the way he's still young right now, and he's able to still run the ball and pass it. I'll temporarily put him above a guy like Trevor Lawrence, because I could still see him putting 2 to 3 seasons of numbers more than Lawrence. But then, even if Lawrence starts to surpass him, I don't think it could potentially be by much. So I'll stick Josh Allen at that number 3 as still a solid dual threat quarterback option. He is a vulture of touchdowns in the red zone when it comes to rushing as well, which you want. When it comes to a fantasy quarterback. Number 2, Joe Burrow. I think that he solidified this spot this season as number 2. He lost Jamar Chase for a chunk of the season and still was producing at a high level. I think he has that it factor. I think that you like to see in quarterbacks. He does have a little bit of a floor with his rushing ability. I foresee Jamar Chase being with Joe Burrow long term, and as long as those two guys are together, I feel comfortable putting Joe Burrow as the number 2 quarterback. And then, I mean, there's nothing to say. Pat Mahomes at number 1, and he's going to be there for the foreseeable future. So, how do you like this? How do you like this top 5 list? I know, obviously, I think all 5 players are in your top 5.
Yeah.
But is there maybe some questions or comments?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think I do have the same top 5 as you. I think the one thing I was kind of curious about was if you saw any tier breaks amongst the top 5. Like you talk about Patrick Mahomes being so far and above. I don't know if that was closer to Joe. Maybe Joe was closer to Josh. Kind of how you broke down your top 5 in terms of tiers and maybe how big those gaps were, just to get a sense.
Man,
Yeah.
I think you have to put Pat Mahomes in his own tier personally, and then I really want to put Joe Burrow in his own tier, and then I kind of clump these next 3 together in like a similar tier. And it's not like I have like an A, B, or C tier or whatever. I'm talking about like when it comes to like their value in fantasy. So like if I was to trade for Pat Mahomes, there's no quarterback that I'm like, oh, you know what? They're toss up. I'll take him over because of preference. That doesn't exist with Mahomes. And then with Burrow, it's like, would I trade it like 5, 4, or 3 for Burrow straight up? Or would I fault anybody for doing it? And I probably would. I'd be like, it's Joe Burrow. Unless you're getting Pat Mahomes for him, you need to ask for a little more. That's what I would do. And it's like if I had Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence, or Jalen Hurts, and someone offered me one of those guys for them, it's like I think preference at that point could take over. Like, oh, I got Josh Allen. Someone's sending me Trevor Lawrence. Someone's sending me Trevor Lawrence. So let me just go that because I prefer Trevor Lawrence. So, which I obviously don't. So, obviously, DMo's having some technical difficulties. I'm sure he'll be right back in here. There he is. Add him right back in here. There you go. Computer die?
Yeah, my computer was acting up, so I just decided to not go through my top 5 and.
Yeah, no problem. I'll just summarize what I kind of just said, and like I said, I put those my 3, 4, and 5 in kind of a similar tier. I think with like if I owned Trevor Lawrence and someone offered me, Josh Allen, obviously according to my list, I would take it. But it's like I wouldn't fault somebody for making that trade evenly. I think they're pretty even when it comes to dynasty value. I think preference could take over. Where at like 2, like Joe Burrow, I value above all those guys. I would need more, and then obviously Pat Mahomes is kind of in his own tier where I would need more. So that's kind of how I value those top 5 quarterbacks. Yeah, well, I won't have you get any more questions because obviously you got the same top 5, just maybe a different order. So let's slide into it.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. For my top 5, for 5, I have Josh Allen. I have him a little lower because of the same fact of like just I see him more the value coming from his running and being able to vulture a lot of those TDs than his arm. He really turned it on once Stephon Diggs came to town. Not saying that Stephon Diggs is probably responsible for all of his production, but he's a really good wide receiver. So I can't. And he gets the amount of separation he gets. I think it definitely contributes to Allen's ability. So I'm kind of curious to see how Allen does play out over the long term. We saw him get dinged up last year on his elbow, and that caused some injury and caused him to miss a game or 2. So if he decides that he's going to continue running, and if that's what the offense wants to do, his lifespan is a little shortened there. He has a decent track record again, but kind of want to see him do it a little longer just to really convince myself. Number 4, I have Jalen Hurts. I have him higher than Josh Allen. They're pretty close for me, honestly. But I think it's just seeing what Jalen Hurts did last season, the fact that he was staying healthy, just the team looks great. And I think he does rely a lot on his legs and his ability, but he's starting to develop a little bit more as a passer, especially with the weapons they surrounded him with. I think he has a bright future. Even though he has that run, he does have a little more of the running. I think the way that the team is treating him and the way that the team is really coalescing around him, he could be there for the long term. So that's why I kind of like him, and he seems pretty durable the way that they're running him. So I have him at number 4. And number 3, I have Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence is kind of one of the big quarterbacks that I've really gotten behind just this past year. I really wanted him a little higher. I think he's one of the best quarterbacks to come out since Andrew Luck that I talked about. And last year was just a complete wash, just being under Urban Meyer. I don't think he got a fair shake and kind of just probably knocked his value down a little bit. If we saw what Trevor Lawrence did this year and kind of said like, hey, that was his rookie year,
I think, people will be really amazed and just really ecstatic about where his future is headed. The addition of Ridley as well, I think, just means that there's just going to be more yards for him to throw. So really excited. I think he's a good leader. And after this, I'll kind of talk about a little bit about trading and how you acquire quarterbacks. I made a trade for him. I might have mentioned in the previous streams, but kind of want to get your thoughts on this in a little bit. Number 2, I have Joe Burrow. Again, just another one of those quarterbacks. I think that's just going to be there for the long term. You talked a lot about how he's with Chase, Jamar Chase, and as long as they're together, I see no downswing for Joe Burrow. Showed that he did it in college. Shows that he did it in the NFL. Don't see why he can't continue doing it. And number 1, I have same with you, Patrick Mahomes. Age doesn't really matter. He's still about 27 or 28. So even if he plays to, let's say, Aaron Rodgers, like 35, 36, that's still a good 10 years. He's shown me that he can do it without the weapons around him as well. Last year, he didn't really have anyone that was really spectacular. I think Juju came the closest with a little under 1,000 yards. But, he really elevated the offense around him. So I really like what Patrick Mahomes does. He's really creative. And honestly, we saw him get injured last year for a little bit, and he just bounced back. And he was like, I think he had like a high ankle sprain he played through, and he was like, I'm fine. So just kind of those things are really encouraging, and that's kind of why I really have him high ranked up there. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you had any questions, but I did have a kind of question for you about dynasty trading and quarterbacks.
You go ahead. I'll ask mine after you.
Yeah. So, in terms of quarterback dynasty trading, I think it's hard for me. I've been playing for like 10 years, and all through that time, I've never really had a good quarterback. I've been playing like Jay Cutler. I had Phillip Rivers for a few years, Andy Dalton in those Bengals days, just running around, trying to find a good quarterback. So for me, it took a little while, and I was able to lock up all the other positions. I usually go after wide receivers, running backs, tight ends. But then once you start really picking out the team, you're looking at quarterbacks. I didn't like spending a lot of assets into the quarterback situation for many of these years because I thought a lot of the position was the same. And, if you have the elite, you have the elite. That's great. Some of them pop for you. But for the most part, I thought they were really close. Last year kind of really separated out, I think, the haves and the have-nots between the quarterbacks, at least, just the leagues I were in. People that had Burrows, that had Mahomes, that had Fields in the latter half, they really just dominated and really kind of sucked just having like Derek Carr all the time and things like that. And it just, man, it was a rough spot. So what I did last year, during this offseason, I made a huge trade. I moved A.J. Brown for this is a 1 quarterback lead. A.J. Brown for Trevor Lawrence, Jameson Williams, and Jacoby Myers and a 3.05. So I basically traded in A.J. Brown for a bunch of small parts. My thinking is that, I think if Trevor Lawrence hits the ceiling that I would hope he does, and same with Jameson, I think I end up net positive on that trade. I think on the current time, a lot of things have to go right. But yeah, I took the dive this year. I traded one of my wide receivers to get a quarterback that I really trust in and believe in and think he'll do well for. And I like the idea of not having to hopefully replace that quarterback slot. So I don't know what your thoughts are in terms of the trade or how you go about acquiring quarterbacks in your leagues.
So I personally don't do super flex, or I only do super flex. So I'm not like super educated when it comes to like 1 quarterback leagues. But I think, when it comes to like my list of players like that I'm looking to buy and sell, AJ Brown is a sell for me. Like, I really think that Devonta Smith is honestly like a better true wide receiver, where AJ Brown is more like just a better talent, if that makes sense. And I think eventually a true wide receiver takes over talent. And I would be surprised to see Devonta Smith outproduce AJ Brown this upcoming season. It might not happen this next season, it might happen in a couple of seasons, but I think he's a good sell. And I know you're a big, and you got one of your guys, like now you have security at the quarterback position. You don't have to stress about it. You just have 1 week a year now that you have to worry about plugging in during his bye week. Outside of him getting injured, obviously. And then I know you like Jameson Williams. And I think Jacoby Myers is a nice asset as well, especially to throw in the flex position. I think Jacoby Myers is in for a career year this upcoming season. So I like the trade personally. I know most people probably wouldn't, because I know in 1 quarterback leagues they're like, you got to acquire as many studs as you can. Is it a 12 or a 10 man?
It's a 12-man, and then on the roster, I still got some pieces left. So on this team, I've got CeeDee Lamb left. I've got Olave and then Jameson, and then I recently picked up Ridley. So it's Ridley was part of like, okay, let's try to go for Lawrence stack, And
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised to see Ridley put up really good numbers these next 2 seasons, which I could see AJ Brown still doing, and then we see AJ Brown start to regress. So it's like I really think you kind of plugged him in with a good veteran that could put up good numbers at the same like level. I wouldn't be surprised if like Calvin Ridley had a really similar season to AJ Brown this upcoming season, if not better. So I think I like the trade. Personally, I don't think it's unfair either way. And it being a 12-man, I think it's better too to acquire some depth because I feel like when you look at teams like in the long run that make the playoffs or make the fantasy playoffs and make the championship, they usually have some depth because rarely does your fantasy team stay healthy the entire season. So I mean I like the trade personally. I could see why some people would prefer the AJ Brown side, but AJ Brown's a sell for me. Jameson Williams is a buy. And obviously Trevor Lawrence is a top 5 dynasty quarterback. So I personally like that trade.
See what happens. Yeah.
Okay. And then here, I'll ask my question in a second. We got Jaws in the chat. Jaws has been supporting RotoHeat for the longest time. What's up, brother? T-Law, top sheriff potential without the elite rushing. I mean, if you're talking about like number 1, I don't think so, as long as Pat Mahomes is in the league. But again, like if we're ranking dynasty, I think we both agree where we're going to we both prefer quarterbacks with longevity, and that don't rely on their rushing ability as like top dynasty assets. Whereas like in redraft, this list could be completely. I'd probably still obviously have Pat Mahomes at number 1, but my number 2 would honestly be probably Jalen Hurts. Number 3 probably like Josh Allen, and number 4 might be Justin Fields. Like that's how different when it redraft rankings and dynasty rankings really are for me. Is I'm cool with taking the rushing upside quarterbacks in redraft because you only need them for 1 season. You don't really care what happens to it. You almost hope they get used and abused like Justin Fields did the second half of the season with the Bears. Whereas like in dynasty, you don't want your rushing quarterbacks to be rushing for 1,200 yards. You really want them like in the 700 range. Giving you a really, really nice floor along with like polishing up their passing skills. So no, I don't think he has number 1 rushing up or number 1 potential with Pat Mahomes. But I think it kind of leads into maybe my question is, do you think Trevor Lawrence could surpass Joe Burrow as like the number 2 fantasy option? And I'll ask the same with that being said, same question. What are your tiers when it comes to these top 5 guys?
Yeah. So I have Patrick Mahomes in his own separate tier too. I think he's done it for too long, too well that anyone's really close to him. I actually do have Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence pretty close. I do have Joe Burrow a little ahead of him just because he's done it for a couple of years, and we know it's a little more consistent with Jamar Chase locked. Those 2 guys are gonna be really locked in. While even though Lawrence has Christian Kirk, he has Ridley for a year. I like Doug Peterson as a coach a lot as well. Maybe give me 1 more year. If you can show me that Trevor Lawrence can put up like a 4,400 yard season, passing yard season with like 30 touchdowns, maybe 10 8 interceptions, something like that, a little bit of rushing stats. I wouldn't be afraid of putting him to number 2. He has the talent. He has the talent to do it, and I just want to see him do it for maybe 1 more year to really really lock me in for it. So I have them really close. After that, there's I would say the tier break between Patrick Mahomes and Trevor Lawrence, Joe Burrow is a little bigger than the one next to Jalen Hurts. So Jalen Hurts is a little closer to that second tier than the second tier guys are to the first one. But that's kind of where I break it down. Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen also together. I think they're kind of in the different stages of their rushing quarterback career. Maybe where Jalen's kind of taking off and figuring out, and would hope that Josh is kind of slowing it down. But that's kind of how I have it. So in my eyes, I do see Trevor Lawrence could possibly overtake Joe Burrow. I think they're similar. They may not have the same talents, but they have the same amount of talent, I think. And really just kind of depends on how many years they're able to do it. And, are they going to continue doing it going forward? Just that one little question for Trevor Lawrence. And, Joe's done it for a couple of years. So that would be my only separation. Mahomes is just, he's just too hard to. I've tried. I threw out a couple offers for him. The guy just laughed me off. He said, "There's nothing you can offer," and so I don't even try anymore. And it's well deserved. I think Mahomes is right up there. So,
with that being said, I was just trying to think of it in my head. What do you think would be the like if you were trying to acquire Patrick Mahomes and you had Joe Burrow? what would you think you'd have to add, or say you're the Pat Mahomes owner, what would you maybe want the Joe Burrow owner to add to be able to maybe get Pat Mahomes off your hands?
Yeah, that's a good question. The first thing I think of is try to think of if you add a player to it, and if you're to say like you're throwing Burrow with another young wide receiver, it'd be hard for me to say no. We're talking like Jamar Chase, Jefferson. I don't know if anyone's offering that in one quarterback.
Yeah.
But
I'm talking more of like probably a super flex. Yeah. I was trying to think. I would guess maybe like a top, say the Pat Mahomes owner doesn't have any depth or very little depth. And it's like, well, maybe, Joe Burrow in like a top 3 pick or 4 pick or something like that.
I think so.
Yeah. I would imagine the 101 might be a little bit too much. That's really hard for me to, I feel like you don't see a lot of quarterbacks being traded a lot in Dynasty. So it's kind of harder, especially super flex. I feel like you don't see it as much.
Yeah.
You really see the picks to get the quarterbacks is what you see getting traded more often than not. So I was just curious because I'm in a situation where I'm in some situations where I've got the depth to potentially acquire like a Pat Mahomes, and I've got like Justin Fields. It's like, what do I add to get him in a super flex league? And the guy that has Mahomes, like the rest of his roster looks a little rough. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. It could be something I fiddle around with later and see. And I know people knock Dynasty trade calculators, but sometimes I just like to get a reference and see like what are because I think their values for picks are terrible in my opinion, like a lot of these trade calculators. But I think some of the player calculators, like the values that they have associated with them, some of them are similar to what I would have. So sometimes I like to get a little bit like use that as a reference and then maybe go from there. But I don't live or die by the calculator. Like if someone offers me a trade, I don't plug it in and be like, oh, this isn't fair for me. I don't do like that. But I think it's good to get a reference sometimes. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I use all the trade calculators too, just to get a gut check, because sometimes I might be way too high on somebody or way too low on somebody and like offer out trades and I'm like, oh wow, market sees them a little better than I do. I shouldn't get them for peanuts, something like that. But you do have to adjust a lot for where you are, whether you're rebuilding, you're contending, you want to look at where your holes are, how you can fill the holes. But they're helpful, but nothing they're not the gospel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, we don't have many questions. Like as expected, we probably get closer to the season. But I want to thank Jay Tact, that mentioned Daniel Jones, and obviously Jaws always popping in here to say, ask a question or say something. So we appreciate you guys hopping in, and we'll get a lot more questions and stuff when season start, or like right before the season and when the season starts. It gets kind of crazy in the questions and comments area. We got maybe 20 minutes of questions to answer. So but we kind of drag these out, talk a little bit more just because fills the gap of the questions we normally get. But again, thank you guys so much for coming in. I can't even remember the topic we have next week, but I know the following week we'll be definitely talking some rookies and things like that, with literally our stream being right before the draft. So that'll be kind of fun. Maybe we'll talk about some potential landing spots or hopeful landing spots that day as well. So we will see you guys this time next week. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe the YouTube channel and follow us on Facebook at RotoHeat Dynasty Fantasy Football. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you guys. See you, Bryce.
See ya.